Hey guys. Ooh. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Sorry, I'm a couple minutes late. Ooh. How are we doing? Are we around? Ah. Sorry, I'm still trying to kind of get myself situated here. Let me know if you can see. Let me know if you can't hear me. Let me know if you're confused. Let me know anything. I want to do things. Oh, Amelia. Oh, Alex. Oh. Humans. Oh. Hear and see. Look at that. Oh, hold on. Gotta move things around. Jacqueline. All right. Oof. Let me see if that's. Yeah. Well, there. Yeah, that works. Everything's terrible. Hold on. I feel like that's like the whole thing, aside from like the terrifying. Maybe is that better? Sorry, guys. Trying to find a sweet spot that's not directly. I can still see and not have like the shadow directly over. Everything's fine. Oh. Okay. How we doing? How are things? How was studying? Can't see any of your comments just yet. There you are. Okay. Glad we're ready to party. Glad we're ready to, live our best lives. There's 22 of you watching now, so good. Remember to like and subscribe. Hello, kid. Okay. So for starters, who's ready to learn? Moses. I am hopefully not ready to learn. Hopefully I'm ready to show you a thing or two about a thing or two. Oof. So tonight, the issue on the table is your test over period 3.1. 3.1 covers basically causes the American Revolution itself, and has some like flashback questions to prior to, also Declaration of Independence. So let's start with some causes of the American Revolution. So you're going to be like, why do you write your A lowercase one place, uppercase the other place? It's just because that's how I live my life, you guys. Because Puckett is, feeling the world right now. It's pretty great. Also have a very limited selection of colored pens to use, so prepare for that. Yeah, we background too. That's accurate. Tell your friends. Guys, it's an APUSH party on. The word is YouTube. The YouTube, if you will. The YouTube. Okay, so causes of the things. Oh, starting with the French Indian War. Excellent. Let's start there. So, French and Indian War. Can anyone tell me what the other name for it is? What you really need to focus on is causes and outcomes. Okay, another name for it is correctly the 7 Years' War. Because it lasted a whopping 7 years. What up? I think. It would be really weird if it didn't last 7 years. Okay, so what were the causes of the 7 Years' War? It's always awkward because, like, as I sit here and wait, you guys are waiting to hear my question, and I'm, like, waiting for you to answer, and there's just, like, weird, like, parallel world of a lull as I wait. Now it feels like I've been waiting forever. Okay, there we go. We have land disputes in an area known as the Ohio River Valley. And because I'm going to draw like the little Ohio, that's supposed to be the Ohio River Valley. And mostly that was because I'm really good with words, especially in the evening. Disputes over guys. Christine may have beat you to the awesome job, Christine. Christine may have beaten you to the causes, but why don't you guys start listing outcomes, and I'll kind of go over these right now. Land disputes over the Ohio River Valley. Land disputes largely had to do with the fact that the British start to move west because, ooh, this is a disgusting marker. Gross. I hate when they do this. They like, fall apart and act all cruddy. They wanted to be a part of the beaver trade. That's a beaver, in case you were wondering. So there's that. They wanted to be a part of the beaver trade because it was very lucrative. It made a lot of money. It made all the monies. Essentially, the war happens. The French and the Indians pretty much team up, and they hey, Antonia, and they fight. The British want to be a part of the beaver trade. Oh my goodness, the French and the Indians fight the British and the British colonists. Largely, it's important to note that the Iroquois nation kind of stays out of this. The Iroquois Confederacy stays out of this. And that's largely because the Iroquois Confederacy, I don't know if I spelled that right, but the internet is forever, so I'm going to acknowledge my problem. The Iroquois Confederacy, they're going to stay neutral and pit both sides against each other. A lot of you say that the outcome is the Proclamation of 1763. Kind of, but not quite. I'm seeing the colonists are happy with their contributions to the war. That's true. The colonists feel like colonists can fight as well as the Brits in their minds. There's more land. The Mississippi River. Instigators. Colin, explain what you mean by instigators. I'm curious. Land gain to the Mississippi River. George Washington even though he didn't win a single battle, emerge as a hero. Hey, Brianna. Okay, colonists feel more like Americans. Colonists feel American as opposed to feeling like British subjects. Another aspect here, I'm going to throw this in. Britain is in debt. Now they have to pay off this 7 years war. So all of this is happening. And guys, kind of like I said, after the French Indian War, everyone's kind of feeling pretty good about Iroquois. They stay pretty neutral, but they're going to pit the French and the British against each other. Iroquois are the instigators of the war. I'm not going to say they were instigators. If anyone was an instigator, it was honestly probably George Washington, but he was just following orders. So there's that. Largely, though, what comes out of this that was pretty bad was Pontiacs Rebellion. I say bad. It wasn't bad, but as we talk about events that led to the war, we have Pontiac's Rebellion, which is basically just an Indian rebellion. It was an Indian rebellion over British land policies. After the war. So British land policies after the war. I'm trying to think what else it was. They were pretty angry about it because the colonists were kept trying to move into their land. And so because of that, because of Pontiac's Rebellion, we're going to see the Proclamation of 1763 get passed. Because the king doesn't want to deal with another war. He doesn't want to have another war on his hands. And so he tells the colonists, you shall not pass the Appalachian Mountains. And in fact, he's going to send soldiers in 1763 to stay with the colonists. And the colonists will have to house the soldiers who are making sure that they stay put. What's this called? Like you all went silent for a long time. I'm not sure what that means. Sometimes it makes me worried. Like you all just went, oh no, I don't know anything. And here the answers flood in. The Quartering Act. The king the king put soldiers in colonist homes. And this is called the Quartering. Because they're staying in their quarters. Quarters is like where you stay. I'm super good with words. So then we have kind of like a series of taxes. We have a series of taxes. We have a series of infringement of rights. As we're kind of looking at, I'm gonna focus this real quick. See if that helps with the things and the stuff. Ooh. Kind of. Okay. Well, there's that. Okay. So the series of acts, we're going to start with the Sugar Act. And guys, if you want to do this like me, you can. It looks like I think I'm just going to end up having like a little pathway to revolution here. We got the Sugar Act. We have the Stamp Act. The Townshend Act. And then we have the Boston Massacre. I have a really funny acronym to tell you guys in a few minutes. It's gonna blow your mind a little bit. Then we have the Tea Act, which takes us to the Boston. Actually, the Boston Tea Party, which then takes us to the Coercive Acts, which then the colonists take part in the first Continental Congress. And guys, I'll tell you the story in a minute. Okay, Antonio, you guys said so. The Quartering Act. There were multiple quartering acts. There were multiple times that the king felt the need to place soldiers among the people. I'll explain that in a few minutes. Give me a second. The Coercive Acts, you have the first Continental Congress. Then we have shots fired at Lexington and Concord. I'm clearly super winning at things. Shots fired at Lexington and Concord, which leads us to have the Second Continental Congress, because they're like, well, what do we do now? And out of this, a lot of things happen. But while they're here, while this is happening, the battle. Oops. Bunker Hill happens. And out of the Second Continental Congress, the Olive Branch. We'll talk about the Second Continental Congress in a minute. I feel like there's enough. I got enough story here to tell you some stuff. Okay, so you guys are asking a lot of good questions. So I kind of want to start with our code here. So the Sugar Act is a tax. Over here, the Stamp Act is a tax. Sugar Act is a tax that basically makes it's a tax essentially on sugars. The colonists are not pleased with it. It's also a tax on like molasses and things. The colonists are not pleased with it, and because they have no representation in Congress. So this one gets repealed. The colonists boycott, the king repeals. The Stamp Act is a tax on paper goods. A good way to remember this is stamps go on paper. Then we have the Townshend Act. The Townshend Act is also a tax. It's basically a tax on any goods that are manufactured in England, like goods that the colonists are literally not allowed to have. The colonists are not allowed to have these goods for themselves and can't make these goods themselves because they're not allowed to have factories. And so the colonists boycott. The king repeals all of them except for the tax on tea. He leaves that one on. And this is all taking place like post 1763. In 1770, I want to say it's like in the winter of 1770, it was snowing. The Boston Massacre takes place. The Boston Massacre is the British incident. The British people called it, referred to it often as the Boston incident. Like they didn't even call it a massacre because they're like, well, it's not exactly a massacre. Essentially what happens is the people in Boston are like rioting. They're really mad. And it was largely members of the Sons of Liberty. Members of the Sons of Liberty worked on the docks. They were on the docks. Okay, I needed to get that out of my system for a second. A lot of them worked on the docks, so they had a lot of weapons. Not weapons, but their tools that they used for work were like these giant hooks to make rope. They had not only these giant hooks, but they had clubs. They were picking up snowballs and putting like rocks and shards of oyster shells and glass in them and then throwing them at the British soldiers. They threw them at the British soldiers. Essentially, they're kind of like the kerfuffle gets a little out of hand. And their right gets a little out of control. One of the British soldiers, and the British soldiers have orders not to fire. And in a moment of panic or whatever happens, one officer fires. And when the dust's cleared, 5 colonists are dead. The first is a man by the name of Crispus Attucks. He dies. He's considered a martyr. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, Crispus, remember Crispus. Legitimately, like, 5 colonists die. One of them is Crispus Attucks. And then Paul Revere writes this epic poem. Oh, unhappy Boston, see thy sons deplore thy hallowed hands besmeared with guiltless gore, while faithless Preston and his savage bands with murderous rancor stretch their bloody hands like fierce barbarians grinning over their prey, approve the carnage and enjoy the day. That's really all it is. Coleman just asked, how did one officer kill 5 civilians? It wasn't. Other officers ended up firing, but one officer fires first, and then it becomes like an attack. Like then it just kind of like blooms. And so when that happens, when the dust clears, 5 colonists are dead. Let's see. Townshend Acts, things that were sent to the colonies, like sent to the colonies. Christian, will your live stream be posted? Yes, it posts right after this. So the Bloody Massacre by Paul Revere, and that's the famous painting that you guys see, that engraving. It's done by Paul Revere, and it spread as propaganda throughout the colonies. Ooh. It spread as propaganda throughout the colonies to say, look how awful, look all these things happening. Y'all, we have to do something. This was like an act of violence against the colonists. That means act of violence. The Tea Act is another tax. Basically, this is a tax that was meant to be like, hey, we're going to make every other tea really expensive so that you want to buy the East India Tea Company's tea. That's what we want in this world. Well, oofta, the colonists were not pleased with that. The colonists react by dumping tea into Boston Harbor. They're done with the whole boycotting thing because clearly people aren't listening. Also, the Sons of Liberty are getting kind of bold. They're getting kind of tired of this narrative. So they dump millions of dollars. Hold on. Boston Harbor. they dumped what was about 92 pounds of tea. It's not just like they dumped. It wasn't like a gentle dumping of tea. It wasn't like, oh, the thing is like they were mad, and so they like went and got all their tucks and just poured it into the Boston Harbor. That's not what happened. What happened was that they dumped 342 crates filled with the equivalent of 92,000 pounds of tea into Boston Harbor. It added up to over $1 million worth of tea that gets dumped. And guys, at this point, the king is done. He is done. So he passes something called the Coercive Acts. In his mind, should help the colonists. He is spilled, literally. The Coercive Acts, he passes to try to like coerce or convince the colonists to behave. He closes downtown meetings because clearly they can't get together because they're foolish. Shuts down the harbor. Instills another quartering act. And that's because Boston is under military rule. Boston is under military rule. Okay, so I feel like you can't see this very well. Yeah, that'll help. Ooh, maybe I made it worse. I don't know. Kind of made it worse. I can't really. Okay, we'll see. Better or worse? Better or worse? I like the eye doctor when they're like, you see better at 1 or 2? 1 or 2? And you're like, oh, I don't know. Literally, Sabrina, that is so true. Sabrina said, I feel like the Coercive Acts is just like the king telling the colonists, and this is why we can't have nice things. Because you take them, because you break them, I had to take them away. This is why we can't have nice things. Whee! Okay, the next thing here, so the colonists feel invaded, so they prepare for war, and at the First Continental Congress, they set up militias. They decide to set up militias throughout the colonies. They're like, okay, so we don't know if we're going to go to war yet, but we need to have like something ready just in case, because clearly it's getting this is escalating. And then we have another thing that happens. General Gage, who is stationed in Boston, hears that the colonists have weapons stored. The colonists are like weapons, and he hears that they're in Concord. So he hears that they're in Concord and sends. He didn't care about that. She said. Oh my gosh, what's my words? Dylan, is that you? Dylan Taylor? I was wondering if you're going to hop on this live stream. Lexington and Concord. So Lexington and Concord, essentially the First Continental Congress, they've already established these militias. Well, the Bostonians kind of had their weapon storage out in Concord, and yes, John, it is. They had their weapons stored in Concord, and the British found out. So General Gage begins a march to Concord. Well, he's marching with his men, so they're not moving very quickly, and so that's when Paul Revere and several others make a midnight ride. Paul Revere actually gets captured and doesn't make it to his final destination. Everybody else does, but Paul Revere had a better publicist. That's kind of like the joke. Lexington and Concord. The British get to Lexington. By the time they arrive in Lexington, some of the people, some of the colonists had gathered, but there's not enough to really make an impact. Not enough to really make an impact. And so once they have the Battle of Lexington, that gives Concord time to have more, that gives Concord more time to like gather their people together and get organized. And the colonists actually defeat the British at Concord. Who were the regulators? Basically, regulator movement were people in like North and South Carolina who were trying to like, they wanted to rebel and not pay taxes, and honestly, I'm literally probably doing what the rest of you did as soon as she said that, and I Googled it. I'm not super familiar with it, and I don't want to tell you the wrong thing. So these are like, in 1764, in North Carolina, regulators rebelled because they didn't want to pay taxes, and their South Carolina regulators who opposed corrupt government and cleared the homeland of, and like, they didn't want bad guys in their backyard, essentially. And they had to do something called the Battle of Almans, which is when the North Carolina regulators basically fight a band of Eastern militia, started out by the governor of North Carolina. The regulators' uprising fell apart, and the colonies found it hard to resist the British. Don't totally worry about that. If you didn't know what that was, then you're fine. Suffolk resolves. Oh, jeez. I know what that is. Okay. Basically, okay, hold on a second. Okay, so the Suffolk resolves were basically just a reaction. The Suffolk resolves essentially were like a reaction to like the Boston Tea Party and the Intolerable Act, not to the Boston Tea Party, but the Intolerable Acts or Coercive Acts that were placed on the colonists after. And it was basically the colonists saying, because you have violated our rights as English citizens, we no longer submit to your rule and we refuse to pay your taxes because this is why we can't have nice things. Oh, everyone meet Dylan, otherwise known as Jack Taylor, which also should sound like your spy name. That'd be fun. Hey Josh, welcome to the chat. CC, what do we need to know about the Continental Congresses? The first Continental Congress, you need to know it set up the militia throughout the colonies. It also established the Suffolk resolves, but that's not really, you need to know that it set up the militia, because when we say it set up the militia, the colonists are preparing for war. They need guns for that. So they put their guns in Concord. The British march. Lexington and Concord happens. Now, Lexington and Concord happens, and now this is an act of violence. And so then the second continent, then they come back together because they're like, whoa, 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 this is escalating a lot quicker than we expected. Oh, Temmie, listen to the Farmer Refuted to hear free thoughts about the Continental Congress. Heed not the rebel who screams revolution. He has not your interest at all. Oh my gosh, there's this doodle pot. Chaos and bloodshed are not a solution. Don't let them lead you astray. Okay, sorry. Difference between the First and Second Continental Congress. Okay, so the First Continental Congress sets up militia. The Second Continental Congress happens after Lexington and Concord. And so the Second Continental Congress, Washington is leader. The Continental Army is formed with Washington at the helm. So they're really kind of getting their ducks in a row. Dylan, we don't listen to it nearly enough. We don't listen to Hamilton nearly enough. So we are going to listen to it. So we have like one whole day next week. That's just listening to Hamilton songs. It's going to be great. So the Second Continental Congress does decide something about two documents. They decide to send the olive branch petition to the king. They send the olive branch petition to the king, and they tell a young man by the name of Thomas Jefferson to begin to draft the Declaration of Independence. Now, while all this is happening at the Second Continental Congress and they're coming up with all these things, that's when the Battle of Bunker Hill happens. At the Battle of Bunker Hill, the colonists lose, but 1,000 British soldiers die. And it makes the British very nervous about fighting the colonists because this is massive bloodshed. Yes, Antonia said it. She says it really well. She says, okay, so the first Continental Congress is like, hey, let's band some people together, and like the hopes of like maybe like protecting ourselves, defending ourselves. And the second one is like, oh yeah, we're gonna need an actual army. Like we need actual people. So it's kind of like it just like everything escalates very quickly. And in 1776, it is resolved that they will send. Yes, Jalen. The colonists still lose. The colonists still lose this. The Battle of Bunker Hill. This is a loss for the colonists. The colonists still lose the Battle of Bunker Hill, but still in 1,000 soldiers. It's kind of aggressive. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All petition, the Declaration of Independence is signed. And so eventually the Declaration of Independence, we're going to kind of shoop down here. Hopefully we're kind of like a little bit there. Right on my other screen, see what like it actually looks like. Oh, okay. So we're like, Spuck, quit moving everything. It's terrible. It's terrible. It's weird because on the other side, it's like the mirror image of this, and so it's very confusing to look at. Okay, so finally, we're gonna have the Declaration of Independence. Declaration of Independence is a list of grievances, basically. It's basically when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for the one to break, whatever. It's basically this. It starts with when in the course of human events, as if to say, okay, so basically we've come to this point in our lives between Britain and the colonists that we need to break up. But before I'm going to break up with you, I'm going to tell you why we're doing it. I'm going to tell you why we're breaking up. I'm going to tell you why we're never getting back together. And so here's this. And so he goes, so basically the colonists go through a list of all the things that he's done, all the things that he has done wrong. He meaning the king, he referring to Parliament. And then they say, let these be submitted to a candid world. Essentially saying like, okay, here's the final straw of it and we're done. We're done. And they declared themselves a free and independent states. They send it all around the world. They put out a list of grievances. They send it all around the world. They declare their natural rights. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Pursuit of happiness part comes from a guy by the name of William Blackstone, who is the Enlightenment thinker that came up with the idea for natural rights. And I say natural rights, I mean unalienable rights. That would be John Locke. John Locke says it, and the colonists. I think if there's anything else you really need to know about the Declaration of Independence. Basically, it's a document that says, hey, we're going to be our own country now, essentially. Once they say, hey, we're going to be our own country now, they also are going to have to create a new government. Because if they're not going to be under British rule anymore, they need to create a new government. So they create the Articles of Confederation. And it's kind of like this like slapstick. I hate to say slapstick, but basically it's like this slapstick government that they kind of slap together. It has no centralized power. It can't tax. It can't raise an army. And so the colonists really struggle throughout the war because they don't have a government that can tell people what to do. Sid asks who is the Dickinson. John Dickinson is a Pennsylvania farmer, I believe. He writes something. My itched. He's from Pennsylvania. He's known as like the penman of the Revolution for his 12 letters from a farmer in Pennsylvania, published between. Basically, he is the one who he wrote the Olive Branch Petition, which sent to King George and failed. He helps Thomas Jefferson write the Declaration of Independence. He does a lot of writing. He served as president of something called the Annapolis Convention, which was a precursor to the Constitutional Convention. Like he is a super big deal. But he's from Pennsylvania. He's a guy from Pennsylvania, and specifically, I believe he's a Quaker. Ow. I just like bumped my elbow. Okay. Yes, he was a Quaker. He was a Quaker. He was basically a Quaker who wrote about how he wanted to that he thought they should go to war. Are there any like key figures that we should know? I feel like I know more events and significant events than people. Okay, yeah, I mean, John Dickinson have to do with like farmers or state constitutions after the yeah, state constitutions are written because everybody needs their own government. But the state constitutions come first in comparison to the articles or to the national government, which is kind of a huge problem. John Dickinson did write the letters, wrote the farmers, like the letters to farmers of Pennsylvania. Basically, when he calls for war, it's like, oh, a Quaker is saying we should go to war? That's epic. The DOI was created before the American Revolution. It was basically we say we are independent states. And the king's response is, no, you're not. And he has hired, at this point, 30,000 Prussian Hessians, or Prussian mercenary soldiers. Prussian would be like German today. Or Germany is today. He's hired like 30,000 of those to fight the colonists. It's kind of rude. People you need to know, I would know Samuel Adams, leader of the Sons of Liberty. Abigail Adams is the wife of John Adams, who famously wrote letters saying to remember the ladies. John Dickinson did letters to a farmer. Paul Revere does the propaganda thing. John Adams defends the Redcoats after the Boston Massacre. Morgan, can you write that down? Just jot that down just for a second. Okay, I'll have like a people corner over here. You see that? Ugh. I'm out of space on my papers. Yeah, that's not it. Okay. James Otis is a lawyer in Boston who argued that the colonists should not be taxed by Parliament because they could not vote for members of Parliament, essentially coining or essentially framing no taxation without representation. You guys want to do a whole new paper? Oof. Okay. All right, you guys tell me the people you want me to write down, and I'll do it. It looks really silly when I do that, but I'm like doing everything in like a mirror image, and it's super weird. Who's Camo de Taco? Okay, so people you want to know about: James Otis, John Dickinson, Patrick, Henry, Edward, Braddock, Greenville, Josh, where are you getting these people from? You're stressing me out. I think he's getting them from the list of the people on that. Oof, so many things happening. Okay. Did I already go over I have not gone over the Albany Plan of Union. You said James Otis in class. I thought you were talking about the student. Sorry, I wasn't talking. We did not go over the Albany Plan of Union. We can okay, guys, Albany Plan of Union. This is gonna be real quick. During the French and Indian War, Ben Franklin tries to unite the colonists under the Albany Plan of Union. Basically, it's the first attempt to unite the colonists. Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Oh, Lordy. Folks, you're killing me. A lot of the people you're talking about are like generals in the army. Like, you're super interested in that, you can learn about them, but like that's not the things. We're never gonna get to sleep. Also, same. So I'm gonna, guys, you can, there are certain things I'm gonna let you just like you do you on. So James Otis. Okay. Don't doubt it. Don't doubt it. He's a lawyer. Basically argues no taxation without representation. Essentially, that's what he does. Or, no, said you do not have to know all these names for the test. John Dickinson is, he's a Pennsylvania farmer. Or not a Pennsylvania farmer. He writes, he's from Pennsylvania. He writes letters to a farmer. Essentially, he supports the revolution, and it's a big deal because he's a Quaker. Patrick Henry famously said, "Give me liberty or give me death." John Adams defends redcoats. After Boston Massacre, not a bowel movement. Samuel Adams is leader of Sons of Liberty. Abigail Adams, wife of John, and she, when he's like off at the Continental Congresses, she writes him letters that say, "Remember the ladies," and basically trying to tell him to treat women better than they've previously been treated by governments. Okay, not Greenville, it's Greenville. That's why I was confused. He's the prime minister who ordered the navigation laws and passed the Sugar Act, Quartering Act, Stamp Act. He's the prime minister of England. Was for the Sugar Act, the Quartering Act, and Stamp Act. Okay, for this test though, you guys, I would focus on, you guys, this is off the top of my head. I don't have the test in front of me. Important people though that I think you should absolutely 100% know are those, like 5. Okay. Samuel is like the, I'm not going to say, I'm not going to say that he, hold on. Everything's wrong. Does anyone see Benny? Samuel's like the opposite of John. Samuel and John are both kind of hotheads, but John like recognizes that he's like an unpleasant person. He's like one of those people who's like, here's the thing, I fly off the handle and people me, but like he has like a heart of gold. John Adams defends the Boston Massacre because he recognizes that it wasn't entirely their fault, and he also recognizes kind of the extremist tendencies of his cousin. Yes, Samuel Adams is definitely an extremist. Okay, so moving on from significant people because let's do that. Okay, next up. There are a lot of battles I could go over with you guys. There are literally tons. There's tons of things that are happening all over the colonies. And I could go over all of them with you. I'm not going to, though, because I think that's kind of obnoxious. I'm going to go over the ones with you that impact, I think, and are the most important. Isn't everyone? No, actually, most people are not extremists. Most people were actually pretty, like, moderate about the whole thing until Thomas Paine writes Common Sense. Also, Thomas Paine is someone you should know. Sorry, let's add him. T. Paine, the original. He writes Common Sense. Which basically convinces the common man to break away from Britain. Okay. But essentially it becomes more and more reasonable. And then when you read Thomas Paine's work, they're kind of like, okay, so this isn't just for the extremists anymore. This isn't just because Boston is going nuts. There's like, it's impacting all of us. So significant battles of events of the American Revolution. Okay, so if this helps you all, they follow an alphabetical order like LSVY. Timmy, every time you put a Hamilton quote, you're like begging me to finish it. I've been reading Common Sense by Thomas Paine. Someone say that I'm intense, so I'm insane. Want a revolution? I want a revelation. So listen to my declaration. We hold these truths to be self-evident. That all men are created equal. But when I'm Jefferson, I'm going to compel him to conclude. Women in the sequel work. Okay. Okay, essentially, that's what that is. Whew. Okay. So these are basically the big battles, the big ones you need to know about. Lexington and Concord, known as the shot heard around the world. It's important because it's important to see that, like, this happens before, like, the colonists cross the line into war. Like, this is all, that's, Lexington and Concord is pre-1776. 1776 Declaration of Independence is established. There are battles before Saratoga. The British take over New York. They capture New York. They capture New York. They capture Philadelphia. Lots of things are happening that are not too great. If you want to kind of review like the story of it, go back and look at the PowerPoints that I posted in Google Classroom. Dates, Josh, that you need to know. We'll cover that in a minute. So Saratoga, so Lexington and Concord is the shot heard around the world. Saratoga is the shot heard around the world. First shots fired, really, of the American Revolution. No, Antonia, those won't be covered because we haven't talked about the Articles of Confederation yet. And I don't believe I've talked to my class about those, so that would be kind of a jerk move. Okay. Saratoga, we convince the French to join the war effort. The French decided to join the war effort after the Battle of Saratoga. I feel like, okay, so Josh, like we have talked about the Articles of Confederation briefly, but you guys haven't really like learned the depths and the breadth of them. Oh, Sid, it's because like sometimes Sid, sometimes Miss Puckett talks and we don't always listen. We also refer to Saratoga as the turning point because once the you can kind of want to draw little arrows on the ends of the S's. It's a turning point because the French decide to join the war. Lafayette himself will not be on the test, but he's a good person to know because it's because of him. He's one of the reasons we have such good relations with France. America's favorite fighting Frenchman. Right. Valley Forge was cold and terrible. That's why I attempted to draw on a snowflake. I'm clearly an artist. Everyone should be jealous. Saratoga, yeah, it's in New York. Valley Forge is basically a cold winter of suffering. Hold on, I need to find a. I feel like it's like morally wrong for me to use like an orange when I'm talking about winter. Give me a second. Walk around my apartment and find things. Ugh. Okay. Basically, it's a winter of suffering for Washington's men. And in this winter of suffering, they actually kind of forged together in kind of a cool way. But it's here that the colonists are kind of turned into a fighting force because of people such as Baron von Steuben, and Baron von Steuben establishes how they should set up their camp. He arrives and is like, "Hey guys, your bathrooms, kitchens need to be on opposite sides of the camp." Steuben is Prussian, which is like, they start like inoculating soldiers. Inoculating means basically doing giving like infecting people who are healthy with smallpox, and the deaths drop dramatically. They drop from being several like hundreds a day to just like a couple dozen, like not very many. So that's kind of cool. They're turned into a fighting force. Washington's leadership really rings true here. Like it's A+. A+ work. This is also where Thomas Paine writes, The Crisis. Did Baron von Steuben and Marquis de Lafayette? No, Marquis de Lafayette was an aide de camp for Washington, so he was kind of like one of Washington's like assistants. He and Rochambeau and Jacques Rousseau and a few of those other people, they were all just like French French leaders. Marquis de Lafayette eventually gets a command, and he will help us significantly at Yorktown. Okay, the Battle of Yorktown happens in 1781. You don't really need to know the year, but just kind of putting it in perspective. It's the final battle. The king decides the war is too costly to pursue. Yorktown. Yes. The end of the war. I don't know if that's a thing. Is that like a stick figure that's like clapping? You don't need to know the ordinances. Don't worry about those yet. It's the final battle. The colonists or the British hand over their weapons to the song, to an old drinking song called "The World Turned Upside Down." There's a whole cool, you can look it up on YouTube, of the cast of Hamilton singing the Battle of Yorktown. Essentially, the French helped secure the victory by surrounding the British troops. Yorktown ends the war. And what we're going to see is the Treaty of Paris, 1783, ends the war at last. It's negotiated by John Adams and Benjamin Franklin, and I believe John Jay. So Josh asked, like, what are the important dates we need to know? Essentially, the war happens and kind of like bookended. So with like one support beam in the middle. You have 1763, 1776, and 1787. You have the First Treaty of Paris that ends the French and Indian War. You can't see. Okay. Right. Okay. Everything's wrong. Oh, dog just parked when I did that. Okay. Treaty of Paris, 1763, ends the French Indian War. Because of British land policies, we have Pontiacs Rebellion. Then we start with Proclamation of 1763. The British are trying to pay off trying to do the tax thing with the Sugar Act, the Stamp Act, the Quartering Act, the Stamp Act, the Sugar Act, and the Stamp Act, then the Townshend Act. That was absurd. The Townshend Act, the Boston Massacre, the Tea Act, the Boston Tea Party, the Intolerable Acts, all the things are happening, which basically lead us to 1776, which is the Declaration of Independence. Then after the Declaration of Independence is signed, we have different battles. We have them moving into New York. We have them taking over Philadelphia. We have the Battle of Trenton and Princeton. We have the Battle of Saratoga, Valley Forge, or the winter of Valley Forge. We have the Battle of Yorktown. Or why did I say 1787? Whoops, 1783. Sorry, guys. Over the span of 20 years, this is kind of our Revolutionary era. 1783, the American Revolution ends. With the signing of the Treaty of Paris. (1783). There were two Treaty of Paris, 63 and 1783. 83 ends the American Revolution. 1763 ends the French and Indian War. Okay, guys, this is like the dumbest acronym ever, but it kind of always makes me laugh. So I'm going to tell it to you because I feel like, sometimes when you're studying, you want funny things that help you remember stuff. There's not really any specific reason that you would need to know all the events. there's no reason you would need to know all the events in order. But at some point in my teaching career, me and some teachers thought it would be fun to come up with an acronym that helps you remember all of them in order. Be prepared for like the dumbest thing you've ever seen in your life. So I still remember it to this day. And like literally I made this, I don't think I've mentioned it in years, but it was such a weird acronym that we did. Oh, geez. Okay, it goes. And Tony, no, you don't need to know all the different types of groups. Like, you don't need to know about like the role. You don't need to know about all the different roles people played. Not for tomorrow, at least. Okay, I feel like you guys are not adequately hyped about this really awesome acronym that you're about to learn. I feel like you should be more hype. So if we could start hyping it up in the chat, I'd greatly appreciate it because it's pretty much the best thing you've ever seen in your life. Okay, well, that feels like the best we're gonna get. Maybe we can do better. I don't know. Maybe we'll see if that does it. Well, regardless, there we go. There we go. Hype. Okay, now we're getting hype. I'm liking it. Hype train. Look at me go with that acronym. I know. Look at me working my hover cam. Okay. Thank you for being adequately hype. So, as the saying goes, as I'm sure you've heard, essentially what this stands for, and I'll write it down in a minute, is the Proclamation of 1763, the Quartering Act, the Sugar and Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, the Boston Massacre, the Boston Tea Party, the Intolerable Acts, the First Continental Congress, and then Lexington and Concord. Okay, so that's that. The acronym is, or the people, question, stories, told by monkeys. Because they poop in front of ladies and children. Guys, are you shook yet? Oh no. I feel like it's is our internet even struggling? Are you guys being able to see things? Doofda, doofda, doofda dee dee. Ooh. How do we feel, folks? How do we feel? It's pretty. Okay, so So people question stories told by monkeys because they poop in front of ladies and children. I know what you're thinking. Guys, this is next level. This is our next leveling of learning the things. People question stories told by monkeys because they poop in front of ladies and children. People is the Proclamation of 1763. Quartering Act. Test us tomorrow, Dallas. Welcome to class. This makes me laugh a lot because they poop. Boston Tea Party. And obviously, before the Boston Tea Party, you have the Tea Act, but then you have the Intolerable Acts. Just remember, they're all important thing for you to know. Important distinction to make. First Continental Congress. And then Lexington and Concord. Oh, this makes me laugh so much. You know, Nathan, you do you, buddy. Guys, did anybody else know that Dallas had funny goats? He's like, oh, my funny goats. He's having a problem with some tools apparently, thinking it's like a wrench. Yeah, Dallas, you shut up at the end of the stream. Guys, honestly, if this is funny to you, you're gonna remember it. If this is like too much for you, don't worry about it. Literally, when I was going through and trying to like remember the causes of the American Revolution, this is what came into my head. And I was like, you know, if I'm using it, maybe they'll like it. People question stories told by monkeys because they poop in front of ladies and children. Dallas, your funny goats aren't gonna like it if you cry, so don't cry. What else? Y'all, really and truly, there are some flashback questions, I believe, on your test. Coercive, we've already talked about the Coercive Acts. After the Treaty of Paris, 1783, the colonists gained land to the Mississippi River. Thomas Paine's Common Sense told people that it made common sense to the common man to break away from Britain. They tried to make peace by sending the Olive Branch petition. They tried to make peace with the king. Let's see. Yeah, you can rewatch it when I'm done. You're not going to have an FRQ. You're not going to have an FRQ this time. Hey, Nathan, calm down. People question stories told by monkeys because they poop in front of ladies and children. It's fine. There shouldn't be anything that we didn't cover in class. There's going to be some stuff from previous units, but it's just a couple of questions here and there. You need to know kind of, especially, you need to understand what like land was exchanged. Christine is all multiple choice again. Yes. Yeah, it's over the information from your last unit. And quite frankly, most of them are just questions from your last test. Yeah. Any other questions you guys have? Lisa, thank you for defending the acronym to the ends of the earth because it's pretty funny. All right, so any other questions you have for me? Anything else I can share with you? Antonia, Florida, basically after the French and Indian War, I want to say the British give Florida to the Spanish. Don't worry about Florida yet. Will dates be important? You needed to know the difference between 1763 and 1783. King Philip's War. Oh my gosh. Okay, Pontiac's Rebellion, guys. I went over that earlier, so go back to Pontiac's Rebellion earlier. Sabrina, look that up. They are two different wars. Dallas, we've been here for about an hour and a half. Hour and 20 minutes, technically, because we didn't start until like 8:33. So, hour and 20 minutes. But really, when you go through the live stream, you can like double time it. So, 7 minutes. Because there's parts where I'm just like waiting over people. Yes, Josh, the 3.1 overview does contain a lot of extra information. Don't worry about Lord Dunmore. At least not for now. Caleb, they may or may not be the ones we went over in class. That's why we had a day to kind of review with you guys and go back and look at things. And go back and look at the tests and look at the ones you missed. How essential are the documents, like details from the hyperdocs? I don't envy you for having to do physics. It sounded like a burp, but it actually wasn't. Nathan, it really depends on what hyperdoc you're talking about. If I say it, if I had to like point it out specifically, it's probably important, probably matters. Read the instructions on the hyperdocs. Be sure you've taken care of business on those. There's also quizzes. Check that out. Dallas, just rewind the live stream. It'll upload in a second. All right, later, folks. Now Miss Puckett has to go to sleep because the day is long. So remember to always question stories that are told by monkeys. Mostly it's because they poop in front of ladies and children. Aw. See, guys, I appreciate your thanks and your willing participation. And the 4 of you who gave this a thumbs up. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to like and subscribe, you guys. It's pretty good stuff. Pretty good stuff. I appreciate that. I'm not gonna lie, still I'm not quite sure when we say, like, I know what it means. Like, I understand contextually we stand a creative acronym. I feel like it means to like it. Like we support that. We're a fan of that. But like I'm not sure exactly. I feel like stand is short for something and I'm not sure what it's short for. It's always kind of confused and bothered me. But that just shows that I'm becoming less hip and with it as the years progress. But that said, I am doing a YouTube live stream, so maybe that makes up for it because I do know technology, sort of. Oh, look at you. 5 more people gave thumbs up. Good job, guys. Good job. Okay. Okay, Elisa, thank you. What if this is all a dream? Oh, that's a really weird and vivid dream you have, Sid. All right, later, folks. Have a wonderful evening. Don't stay up too late.